there. Good boy. What's up, guys? Do a video today on flipping grass, or how to approach, going about fishing pads and grass. The fish have completed spawning, and the next move they're going to make is coming out towards the grass areas or pads where all the bait fish is moving. The biggest thing I try to look for is change, for the most part. I'm constantly looking to see, if it goes from 3 to 5 foot, or 3 to 4 foot, or even as much as 6 inches sometimes to make a difference. Trying to focus on those areas. Normally, if I see a cluster that's by itself, that's another area that I'm going to focus more on. I pretty much, there's a bite now. Oh. I pretty much start out on the points of the grass, or the points of the pads, and then I see if I can get that one again. Then I move my way out to the edges. So I'll start on the points and then work my way around the edges of it. I don't know what that was. Oh, there's another bite again. Is that him? That's him. There we go. Got him that time. Alright. Pretty good one. Fucking choked it too. You guys see that? Choked it. Oh, I got him in the tongue too. I want to get him back in the water. So anyway, we get him loose, and then I'll get back to what I was. There you guys go. There you go, buddy. Alright, so if you take a look at what I just did there. First I started on this area here, over here. See that edge of the pads right there? Then I worked my way around the front, and then I just caught him on the right side. So you normally want to start on the point and then work your way around each edge of it before you move on to the next one. You gotta kind of, that's probably the hardest question I get is, well, how do you know where to start? There's tons of pads, tons of grass. They don't stay in here year round. They kind of use them as they're moving out towards their offshore summer spots. This year's been a little bit weird. They haven't quite, usually by this time they're offshore, but they've still been in the grass for the past few weeks. But anyway, what I look for is you have to have deep water nearby. If you don't have deep water nearby, you're wasting your time. I mean, right now I'm sitting in 5.4 foot, and it just, dropped down to 5.4 from 7.4. So, like I said, you look for those small, subtle little drops. And most of the time there, if you focus your time and work it thoroughly, you can, pick one or two out from there. Now, I mean, normally in grass, you're not going to run into a school of them. Like, if you get two out of a smaller area, that's good. But, I mean, every so often when you get those little drops and changes, you'll be able to pick two off here, two off there, one here. And a lot of the times they're big ones. That one was 2.5 pounds or so. It wasn't a huge one, but it's better than nothing. It's probably one of my favorite times, after the spring, once the fish start moving out from their spawning areas and they're moving into grass out on the main lake, which I'm out on the main lake right now. It can get real good. That's when the numbers comes into play. The tournament last Sunday, came in third in that one. We had 17 fish by 8:30. We had called every fish we had. could never get that 5-pound bite that I needed. But and if you have pads by themselves with no grass around them, I'm not even going to waste my time on that. You know, there's got to be deep water. There's got to be some kind of gradual change, and there's got to be bait. Obviously, a good sign for finding bait is if you watch for those blue herons, or the big beaked birds. They'll tell you where the bait's at, because that's all they do. They kill shit. So anyway, like I said, start on the points of the grass. You know, anywhere that it forms a point is always a key spot. It's even better if you have a change, you know, close to it. You know, I'm talking about little bits of change. I just went from 5 foot and I'm coming up to 4 foot now. That's a subtle change, but it's enough. You know, it's just differences. If you have nothing but flat ground throughout the area that you're fishing, that's the little key stuff you want to look for, especially on lakes that are flat, that don't have a whole lot of structure. But I mean, this one's loaded with it, so kind of pick and choose how you want to fish, which I see a majority of people like to fish shallow, which I do too. But in the heat of summer, it's hard to get them that way. You know, you got to go looking offshore for them. This morning I was catching them. I'll put some of the catches up from this morning, but how I was talking in my earlier video, how you want to start with that as you're following them into their spawning coves or their spawning grounds, and then you follow them back out. Well, today it took them a long time, but they're finally, you know, at the mouths or the points of the coves now, so they're working their ways out. It doesn't happen fast, you know. It might happen over a period of a month. It's taken them almost a month and a half for them to gradually move their way out, so they're going to have several stopping points along the way. So this morning I caught a 5-pounder and a 2-pounder in the same spot moving out, right next to the creek channel. Just like I was saying before, you gotta stay near that channel. Another good thing to look for is when you have a separation in the pads. Like if you have a row of pads and then they stop, you know, this is sparse here. You can kind of see it, but when it has a huge stop, you can't see any more pads. It's just pads, stops for like 20 yards, and then it's pads. Those are areas where the bottom composition changes. You know, where the grass and the pads grow, there's not, you know, it's that certain type of bottom that they're going to grow. When you don't have that, then you have no pads for a certain amount of time. That's another, you know, key change that you can look for that's easy to spot visually. You don't have to have electronics to see something like that. I mean, it could be that it's a deeper little hole there, or that it's just a change in bottom, which is all important. I mean, sometimes you can be outside of the grass and on those little stretches where there's, you know, different bottom, and you can pick them off that way too. As far as baits, I mean, I choose to use Strike King products. That's pretty much basically all I use. There's several different flipping baits on the market that you know, I would recommend that are good. Strike King's my #1. Zoom products are good. You know, brush hogs and speed crawls, and you know, Havoc has a bunch of good baits out, the Rocket Crawl and the Pit Boss. And right now the water's kind of dingy, so you want to use a natural color but with some kind of flash to it. You know, right now I'm using green pumpkin with a little bit of blue. You could use green pumpkin with red, green pumpkin with white, just depending on how you want to, what you're trying to mimic. I mean, right now there's a lot of bluegill in here, so I have a bluegill color on. But most of the time when I see bait down a fish's mouth, it's normally shad, and they're big. You know, they're eating 6 to 8 inch shad. They're not eating small meals, so don't be scared to throw a big bait. This is another perfect example right here. If you look over here, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but there's a pads, and then the grass extends out into a point right here. You can kind of see it. Even that little subtle point right there, you want to hit the sides and the front of that as well. I mean, those are the little key areas that I'm talking about. I'll show you guys how I have my bait rigged up too here in a second. This is another good area when you have a bunch of pads and then you have just one single pad out in the middle of nowhere. You always want to target that isolated piece too. There's places that's the kind of stuff that they hang on. I mean, James River in Virginia, for some reason they just will not get up on those pads. They'll stay on a single pad that's just out in the middle of nowhere. Just isolated pads. I don't know whether there's some kind of difference in the bottom that it does that, but it's pretty awesome. So once you cast it out, let it sit on a slack line. Kind of lower your rod down with it. Watch your line, and then pick up the slack. Most of the time, you're going to have that line moving off before you even get to lift up the rod. Make sure you know that's when you want to rip into them. All right, let me show you guys how I have this rigged up. So I got a 4/0 trocar flipping hook. You always make sure you push your bait all the way up on the keeper and then just penetrate the hook through the back side of it just a little bit. I got a 3/8 tungsten Eco Tungsten makes that bobber stopper. Make the bobber stoppers crucial. If you let this bait or this if you let the bullet weights kind of slide up and down, it's no good, because then you're creating an action in the bait that's not natural. 17-pound fluorocarbon, Berkeley Trilene 100% fluorocarbon. I got a Shimano Core 7:6 gear ratio. You need that high-speed gear ratio so you can catch up to them quick. And then I got a 7.6 medium heavy Veritas. It's basically what I use for the majority of the stuff that I do. I'll go through some other stuff with you after these fish start moving offshore. I'll kind of go through that with you and give you a good understanding of that too. Yeah, while I got this out, I'll give you guys a little tip on what I do to my frogs. Alright, straight out of the package it'll work fine. The legs are just a little too long, so what I do is I cut down my legs, make sure they're the same length. I cut them about half the length they are so that they're still a couple inch. Realistic frog legs aren't this long, you know, so cut them down a little bit. The top of the frog color really doesn't matter at all. As long as the bottom's white or yellow, you're good to go. I always use braid when throwing topwaters, and I also, this one did not have a rattle in it, so what I did was I put a rattle in there's a little asshole in it. I put the rattle in the asshole. So now it has a little bit of rattle to it. It's a little tip. My frog rod, you need something that's got some backbone to it. So again, it's an Abu Garcia Veritas rod, 7 foot 3 inches, medium heavy, and I always throw it with braid. You don't need a ridiculous size braid on here. I mean, I use 30 and that's plenty. You know, just check it every once in a while to make sure there's no like serious burns in it. The reason for throwing braid, again, I mean, there's a variety of people that watch these videos, so if you're intermediate, you know, or advanced, kind of bear with me when I share this kind of stuff. But you know, I know a lot of people think, well, everyone knows that. No, not everyone does know that, so I gotta, you know, be aware that not everyone is advanced. But the reason I throw braid is because it floats. Mono has a slow sink to it, I do use it very seldom. Fluorocarbon is what I use 90% of the time, unless I'm throwing top waters. Fluorocarbon I'll use 14 for cranking and 17 for anything else. Sometimes with my deeper cranks I'll go to 12, but the reason for it is just simply because braid doesn't sink. It keeps that top water up high on the water. If you have fluorocarbon or even mono, something that sinks, you can't work that bait nearly as good because your line is sinking and it has a huge bow in it, underneath the water. So you want to make sure that you throw braid. It's a lot cheaper too, so save you some money. Alright guys, well if you have any questions or anything else, just leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to put another one up as I'm kind of figuring out what the fish do. I'll kind of try to let you know and hopefully show you some tricks on fishing on Lake Nockamixon. If you fish here often, it'll surely help out, and hopefully you guys can catch a few more. Hey, looks like you, short and skinny.